Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Metropol TV, the first 24-hour business channel here in Kenya and in East Africa. My name is Ali Khan Sachu. I'm your host for the next 60 minutes, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Let me start in Kenya. I saw an interview with Dr. James Mwangi. Dr. Mwangi is, of course, not the Chief Executive Officer of Equity Bank in Kenya. That's Polycarp Igathi, but he's the CEO of the group, and he was saying the following. He was talking about Ethiopia, and he said, we are focused on Ethiopia because that market could possibly open in 2020, 2021, and he speaks of his entry strategies through acquisition. He's looking to buy a bank in Ethiopia. He says it's a big market, more than 100 million people, actually twice as much as Kenya. And in big markets, he says, you enter by acquisition. He's had tremendous success in DR Congo. DR Congo is normally thought of as a very volatile country, of course. They recently had the election, but he's doing extremely well. And I think he's got a tremendous business for the mass market. That's what the business was built on. So it's quite interesting that he's targeting Ethiopia, but obviously giving it a long enough off-ramp, 2020, 2021. They reported full year results. Earnings per share was up 5%, considerably below the likes of KCB, which was up about 17%. But remember, Dr. Mwangi changed, he pivoted to safety. And about 2 or 3 years ago, when the interest rate caps were brought into play, he said, look, I'm not going to lend at this cap rate to the customer base because it's not a good risk. And he started buying Government of Kenya securities. And he has on his balance sheet, I think, about $1.62 billion of government bonds, probably the biggest portfolio of any institution here in Kenya today. The share price has rallied 23.39% this year. That's pretty good, you must admit. Essentially, he's looking regionally. He's already told us he's got a big war chest, and if that rate cap is removed, he'll put more money to work here in Kenya. But keep an eye on that business. Very mercurial leader, Dr. Mwangi, and talking about Ethiopia. A lot of people are keen on breaking into that market. UAP, which of course is majority owned by Old Mutual, UAP announced its first loss in about 10 years. A 518 million shilling loss, $5.18 million. And they spoke, Peter Mwangi, who was previously the Chief Executive Officer at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, and then he took this role at UAP Old Mutual, said this. He said, performance was impacted by a tough operating environment in Kenya and the wider region. We have to let go of accounts we couldn't price properly, and that has had an impact on the top line. What he's talking about is actuarial pricing, the art of insurance. You've got to calculate the risk when you give the insurance. And what he's saying is there was business that was not good risk-adjusted business, and they've had to provision for that, I think. Insurance business, which is the core business of Old Mutual, though if you drive around Nairobi or up a hill, you'll see they've got an enormous building which they like to light up at night. I'm sure you've noticed that's theirs as well. But premiums was down just over 1%, and their claims, the money they had to pay out, rose by 10%. So you can see claims not moving at the same speed as what they were having to pay out. That's called a double whammy in the market, is when you get one whammy from one side, reduced collections, and another whammy from the other side, you've got to pay out more, and it's called a double whammy. Talked about more prudent reserving in our short-term insurance businesses, talked about claims deterioration in South Sudan, where inflation remains high. Actually, South Sudan has the highest inflation in Africa, 188%. Think about that. However, let me give you another thing. Venezuela, this is Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela, where the Russians have sent in some troops, the Chinese have sent in some troops, trying to block possible regime change by the United States and their favored president, Juan Guaido. Their inflation is 10 million%. Of course, the highest inflation rate we've ever seen was in Zimbabwe when it went into the billions. It's just unthinkable. It means, you know, you walk out of the shop, you come back, the price has doubled, you walk out again, it's doubled again, and it carries on like that. So he's saying South Sudan caused them a problem. South Sudan, as we all know, has been a problem for many Kenyan institutions. We all trooped in there. It was going great guns in the boom years. And then, of course, the boom went bust, and we're still trying to deal with the bust at the moment. And also, they took a property write-down of $604 million, $6 million. I suspect that's on their flagship Old Mutual UAP tower, which I don't think is fully occupied as we speak. And it's been a story for most insurance companies this year. You'll see that they're not reporting better profits, they're reporting worse profits practically across the board. Kenya Rees, you can name them all, and you'll see that they've lost, they haven't reported better profits. And I wrote about this at the end of the year last year, and I called it copying the Queen of England in 1992 when she had a very bad year. She said it was an annus horribilis. I can't copy her voice, but that's how she said it. What she meant was that it was a terrible year. Last year was a terrible year for investors in most stock markets. In fact, 93 out of 100 assets fell in price. But this year we've had an annus so far mirabilis, and therefore we should see a good recovery in a lot of these insurance companies which are currently reporting figures which are not as good as the previous year. Let me move further afield in Africa. The big news in Africa comes out of Algeria, where essentially Bouteflika, the wheelchair-bound Bouteflika, has been forced out of office. He hasn't given a date yet, but he said he's stepping down before the end of the month. Have a look, if you can, at this short clip. It's about 30 seconds, and it's really of those protests in Algeria. And the description that Joyce Karam, whose clip this is, she says, look at these protests, peaceful, festive, resilient, inclusive, and didn't stop. In fact, they grew in size, they kept on growing, and there was only one choice left to Bouteflika. Either you suppress it, and we've seen suppression in Khartoum, we've seen suppression in Harare, we've seen suppression in many parts of Africa, but it was just too big. And they're now, the question is, are they going to be able, is the crowd going to be able to change the entire apparatus? Because he's just the face. There are people behind him. And normally in these situations, the people behind him will think, let's just change the face and stay in the background. And the crowd, of course, will not want that in Algeria. And this goes back to that quote I keep repeating, which was written about the Shah. Of course, the Shah was an important American ally, and then he fell in the blink of an eye. And this Polish writer who was there at the time, and the crowds grew, and in Iran, the crowds would come out on a Friday. That's why in Muslim countries, very dangerous a Friday, because everybody goes to the mosque, pour out of the mosque. And what Khomeini used to do, he'd send a tape, and they'd play this tape in all the mosques in Iran, and people would be so upset and so angry, and they'd come out of the mosques, and the Shah at one point tried to shoot them dead, realized he couldn't shoot so many people, then he lost power. And what Kapuscinski says is, if the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. The crowd did not do this in Algeria. They did not disperse, they grew, they did not go home, they became bigger, they reassembled. and therefore the revolution as we know it was not over. And Bouteflika's people are now trying to do something. Let's see what they come up with. It's a fluid situation. Marwan Bishara, who I know from Al Jazeera, said this: the big question facing Algeria, like others before it, what, not who, replaces Bouteflika? This is the point, right? It's not just about one person. But Bouteflika was actually a really interesting and fascinating person. He became a Minister of Foreign Affairs at the age of 25. Before he was wheelchair bound, he was a very, very well-known Pan-African, non-aligned movement, freedom fighter. He fought the French. Of course, Algeria was a French colony, very bitter civil war. Thousands of people died. Part of the reason that Bouteflika held on was he kept telling them, you don't want to go back to those days when you were slaughtered in the streets, and he managed to hold on to power by scaring the people of what had gone before. But the problem is, for a lot of these leaders, is our people are so young. The average age in Africa is 18. They don't remember these things, right? This is the born-free generation. And what we're watching now is the assertion of this new born-free generation over the old freedom fighters like Mugabe, like Bouteflika. It doesn't resonate with their people anymore. In fact, it's largely meaningless. People don't, they're dealing with their day-to-day lives. They're not bothered about what happened 40, 50 years ago. In fact, most people have forgotten about it. That's an interesting point, I think. Bouteflika, as I said, 82 years old, a veteran of Algeria's war for independence, fought French colonial rule, led the non-aligned movement, which was a very famous third world movement, trying to get us rights here in the third world. He was a leader of that. Young Nelson Mandela got his first military training in Algeria. That's why Nelson Mandela never said anything against Algeria or Gaddafi. These are the people who supported him when he fought for the freedom of the black South Africans. Such a shame that they are now killing their fellow brethren who looked after them when they needed it during the years of apartheid. Che Guevara, well known, Black Panther, Eldridge Cleaver, very famous chap. Timothy Leary, who was the drug-taking high priest of the US counterculture, he got refuge in Algiers as well from Bouteflika. And then what it was an interesting note, I realized, he never got married. He lived with his mother, Mansouria, in an apartment in Algiers where she used to prepare his meals. So we can imagine what's happening right now. They're probably talking about the life. He's now stepping aside. We need to watch and see how that develops. But remember, the importance of Algeria is this. They supply 1/3 of the gas to Europe. They are there on that Mediterranean, North Africa. What are the Europeans fearing? They're fearing hordes of Africans coming across the Mediterranean Sea into Europe. And therefore, they're keen to bottle up Algeria, just as they're keen to bottle up Libya. As Gaddafi told them, he said to them, if you topple me, it's like you're uncorking Libya. They didn't listen, and of course he suffered a horrible death. The Comoros Supreme Court has affirmed the victory of Azali Assoumani. This was with 59% of the vote. The vote was held on March the 24th. His election had been disputed by the opposition, and there was quite a lot of toing and froing. Comoros is an interesting place. It's an Indian Ocean island, not far off the coast of Mombasa, about 2 hours on a flight. And people are very interested in these Indian Ocean islands. Let me tell you why. They have enormous economic exclusion zones. And therefore, you can, if you are on side with them, you can control a huge amount of the Indian Ocean. Last year, at FOCAC, which is the Chinese Africa conference that's held once a year, where, by the way, every African leader, I think, except President Magufuli, attended, the Chinese president forgave all the debts and interest owed by these Indian Ocean islands. So they're a prize that a lot of people are looking for. Comoros is important. People think there's a lot of oil and gas there. I came across an extraordinary story, and first I thought it was an April Fool's joke, but it turns out it's not. President Kagame is accusing Uganda's President Museveni of fueling a rebellion. This is an interview in Jeune Afrique. He said he foiled a terror attack from Uganda. He says the government has multiple and irrefutable evidence that President Museveni has offered his help and logistical facilities to individuals and groups to start a rebellion against Rwanda. Of course, President Kenyatta, I think just about 2 weeks ago, visited Kigali, visited Uganda. Museveni was here a few days ago. But obviously there is friction at the very heart of the East African community, and we should keep an eye on this story. Let's move into the international markets. Every day there are headlines saying that the Chinese and Americans are about to agree on this whole tariff war business, and President Trump has become very clever actually. He actually games the market. He says very positive things in order to make sure the market doesn't come down or will get worried about the negotiations. But the biggest beneficiary of a settlement between America and China would be the Chinese stock market. It was the worst performing stock market last year in the world out of 104. And this year, it's now at its highest level since May last year. It's risen about 30%. This year. Normally you call, if you have a 20% increase in a share or in a stock index, you call it a bull market. So the Shanghai Composite is in a bull market. Expectations are high that Xi and Donald are going to kiss and make up, and they're looking to that happening. So clearly the market would not be happy if we went in a different direction. Crude oil, best performing commodity this year, hit its highest level since November, up about 34%. Could become problematical for Kenya because we are importing our oil. We haven't started really extracting the oil from Turkana. I know they send the odd lorry down to Mombasa, but nothing meaningful. And the point is that, this is now possibly becoming an issue. Every month we write a check. The price of oil has risen 33% since December. There are some quirks in our system, but essentially what's that telling us? It's telling us we're having to pay up to 33% more for the oil today than we were paying for it in December. As I told you yesterday, it's not reflected in the pump price because of the amount of tax that's being put on it. But I, for one, think it's now due a correction, and I would not be buying it here. The market is nervous, obviously, about the sanctions against Iran, about what's happening in Venezuela, where it's largely imploded. Once upon a time, Venezuela used to pump more than 10 million barrels a day. 10 million. Just think of that. 10 million times 60 is $600 million of income per day. And do you know how many barrels they produce now? Less than 1 million. So therefore the economy has totally collapsed. It was an oil economy. There's no more oil. They're not able to drill it. Now let's go on to a very interesting point which I made to you yesterday. I was telling you about how President Trump might shut the border with Mexico, and therefore 80% of the avocados that come into the United States of America come from Mexico. This might be an opportunity for Kenya. Maybe we can stick them on the plane, direct flight it to New York and sell our avocados there, because ours look a lot tastier than those Mexican ones, which are called Hass avocado. Now, the price of avocados yesterday in America jumped 34%. 34% is huge in one day. It means something that cost you 100 bob in the evening is costing you 134 bob, right? You're not going to be happy, are you? Well, I wouldn't. But the point is, that's what happened yesterday. And then I sort of mentioned to you yesterday that there seemed to be a correlation between Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and avocados. And now the lady from Bloomberg, Tracy Alloway, has produced this graph. Look at it. This is a comparison between Bitcoin and avocado. It's practically 100% correlated, isn't it? Now, you would think that, of course, Kwame Owino, who's going to come on our show hopefully soon, will tell you correlation is not causation. You can find things which move in the same way, but they're not correlated to each other. They're totally uncorrelated. But the point is, it is what it is, right? You look at that chart, you say to yourself, these things are moving in lockstep. They're moving together, which comes, and let me show you one other thing. This is the Bitcoin chart. This Bitcoin ran up nearly 23% yesterday. It corrected a little bit, so it got all the way to $5,090 per Bitcoin. It then dropped to about 4,700, and today we're now at 5,300. So we've had a huge rally in Bitcoin as well. A lot of people hold Bitcoin. A lot of people I've met here in Kenya hold it as well. I told you that we are the 7th largest holders of Bitcoin when you compare it to the size of our economy, which is an interesting point. And look at this chart from Matt Miller. We're now up above 5,000. Now, what happened yesterday? Let me tell you. This is what I found out on Reuters. It was a $100 million order to buy Bitcoin. It was the total order. It was an algorithmic order. It means no human intervention. It's the machines that do it. And this is what's happening in our markets today. When I first started, it was all on the phone. You'd call people up. What's your price? You'd have to ring around. Today, no one's speaking to anybody. You do it on your phone. You do it on your computer. Your computer automatically updates your order. There was an article yesterday I was reading which says, you know, we think that we are running the machines, but the machines are running us today. This is, so let's get back. So it was a 100 million order. Bitcoin trades in many different exchanges, from Japan to South Korea to all kinds of places. This order was put through 3 exchanges. And let me just read you so you can see what it said. Oliver von Landsberg-Sadi, who's the chief executive of a London-based cryptocurrency firm, BCB Group, said the move was triggered by an algorithmic order worth $100 million. There's been a single order algorithmically managed across 3 venues, buying 20,000 Bitcoin. Now listen to this. If you look at the volumes on each of those 3 exchanges, they were in concert. It was done together, synchronized, units of volume of around 7,000 Bitcoin in an hour. And that's what drove up the price of Bitcoin. So you had a mystery buyer come in and say, I want to buy $100 million worth of Bitcoin. That shoved up the market more than 20%. Market has gone even higher, which might mean that buyer had more to buy, not just $100 million. We'll find that out over the next few days. But there are a lot of people who had bought it, had become quite evangelical, I tend to find. Many, you know, they look at you and they have 100% faith in the crypto world, and can't seem to believe that the price can come down. But we're back to the good old days, and the price is surging, as you can see. Hass avocado, as I told you, jumped 34%, the most in 10 years. That was a huge move as well. And I think, you know, the cryptocurrency market and the avocado markets intersect. I call it the crypto trading avocado millennial economy. Why? The people who like to trade Bitcoin on their computers also like to eat avocado on their toast. And it is this sudden sort of Gladwellian thing where everyone decided avocado was the best fruit that you could possibly, it had a tremendous value, your skin looked good, everything was great. And of course that created enormous demand for avocados. Even in Kenya today, a lot of people looking at that avocado market. It's a huge opportunity in my perspective. And I call that crypto avocado millennial economy the zeitgeist of the time. A zeitgeist is the defining spirit or the mood of the age that we live in. And capturing the zeitgeist of the now today is not an easy thing, because we live in such a dizzyingly fluid moment. Things can change from today, tomorrow, a tweet, who knows. We've never lived in a world that's moving this fast, in my opinion. Let me come quickly to a couple more points. Vancouver, which is in Canada, one of the best, fastest growing real estate markets in the world. The Chinese were big buyers in Vancouver. You remember that truce dinner where Trump and Xi had dinner in Buenos Aires, and had a very lovely dinner too, steak and a very delicious dessert. Trump likes his desserts, chocolate and cream actually. And also, it's always very interesting to see what people eat at these big summits, and Trump always has a steak, and he doesn't drink. He's a teetotaler, by the way. But the point was, at that dinner, when they were meant to be making up and kissing and making up, and half an hour later, at the instruction of the Americans, the Canadians arrested the chief financial officer of Huawei. This lady was, and she's still in Canadian custody, and the Chinese are very unhappy about it, and they said that Canada would face grave consequences if she was not released, and she hasn't been released. They've in fact incarcerated a few Canadians themselves. But I said at that time when this happened that this puts the Vancouver real estate market at huge risk, because that's a quick way for them to put pressure on Canada. And we've learned that house prices in Canada have dropped substantively, in Vancouver in particular, down about 7.7% from a year earlier. This market had boomed on Chinese demand, and obviously Chinese demand is drying up. Justin Trudeau, the very handsome gentleman, people tend to pick on him. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was picking on him, and it seems Xi Jinping is feeling the same impulse, and it seems that Vancouver is going to get it as it is at the moment. We can't finish off today's first session without talking about Brexit. The pound, after testing 130, has rallied again. And this is what I was telling you sometimes, everything, we've talked about it. Brexit's been on our TV every day. It's been years now. And that gives you an opportunity to price something into the price of the currency. And what people are thinking is, look, just about everything you can imagine that can go wrong, we put in the price now. Therefore, the price is not going lower. The pound is actually going higher. The pound jumped to above 131 today. And that was on the news that Theresa May was going to have tea with Jeremy Corbyn. That's the opposition leader. Maybe that handshake virus of President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga has infected Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. So they're trying to cobble together some kind of combined support for her Brexit plan, I believe. We're going to find that out soon. That news lifted the pound. I follow a chap called Karl Marx on Twitter. He's Lebanese, I think, and he said, look, things are getting serious, he said. Theresa May invited Jeremy Corbyn for tea. The beverage has an important symbolic value in British culture. Indeed it does, and has an important symbolic value in our culture and in our economy, of course. Tea prices have been hitting some lows down in Mombasa because of oversupply. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. We will come back to you in a few minutes. We're going to be speaking with the Permanent Secretary at ICT, Jerome Ochieng. And of course, this is the hot subject of the day, Huduma Namba, which I'm reliably told is the Huduma number, which has become a hot topic. I look forward to engaging with him in a few minutes. If you've got any questions, because I was listening to everything today and everyone was talking about it, even the church was worried about, and I don't know why, but I couldn't make it, but saying that they were uncomfortable with it. So I look forward to speaking to the Permanent Secretary. We will explore the digital economy, the information century. How are we positioned as a country? How are we going to surf this new economy? And maybe when will we see the first unicorn here in Africa? A unicorn is a company, normally an IT company, which is set up and valued at $1 billion. I think the first African unicorn is going to be Jumia, although is it an African company? It's operating in Africa, but its ownership is outside Africa. Its IT is outside Africa. Practically everything else is. So these are the sorts of questions I will come up with. Thank you for tuning in. Look forward to engaging with you in the second half. My name is Ali Khan Sachu. This is The Smart Investor. This is Metropol TV, the first 24-hour business channel here in Kenya and East Africa. Thank you. Welcome back to Metropol TV, The Smart Investor, and we got a very smart guest here, the Permanent Secretary for ICT, Jerome Ochieng. Jerome, before we go into our discussion, we wanted to just play you the clip from President Kenyatta speaking about the Huduma number, which apparently is called the National Integrated Identity Management System, NIMS, as you've told me.
Correct.
Yeah, so welcome to the show. If
Thank
we
you.
can just listen to the clip first.
Yeah.
Yeah. P.S. We just heard President Kenyatta give his perspective on the Huduma number. If I just listened to the media today, I heard people from the religious side worried about it and kept bringing up the number 666. I heard people saying all our information is going to be in the hands of the government. What will they do with it? Why don't you just tell us from where you're sitting why you're keen on bringing what is a $77 million project from what I can see here?
Right.
And can you just calm and allay some of the fears that are out there?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much,
Pleasure.
Lee, for having me, and it is really my pleasure to be here today. Just to pick from what the President was talking about, one of the things the President mentioned that this registration exercise is very important for us as Kenyans. Why Huduma number? It's really, and to echo what the President has said, it is really not the first time that Kenyans are being registered. We have gone through registration processes a couple of times, and we have data about Kenyans sitting in all sorts of different databases. One of the things the Huduma number is going to achieve is that we are going to collate the respective databases that we have, and we are actually going to come up with a number for every single citizen that we'll be describing as Huduma number. This particular number we are actually referring, and this particular database, we are referring it as the single source of truth about citizen information. The extra thing that we'll be doing in this particular registration process is that we will be capturing biometric data, which...
What is the biometric data?
Biometric data.
Yeah, what would that be? Fingerprints?
The biometric data will be fingerprint and the facial,
facial recognition.
Facial recognition. Those are the two biometric data that we will be capturing. People have talked about DNA samples.
Yes,
being
yes. Is that true?
collected.
Is that true?
That is very far from the truth.
Yes.
And for the people who have actually, because the exercise started yesterday, for the people who have gone through the registration process, they will attest to the fact that no DNA data is being collected about anybody.
But you're taking facial
We
recognition.
are taking two sets of biometric data, the fingerprints and the facial recognition.
So can I just push back on you on a couple of things? If you look at places like in China, they've got a social credit scoring system.
Right.
So for example, it's so sophisticated that if the light is red and you cross it, you'll get marks. And in fact, there's 17 million Chinese who are not allowed to fly at the moment because of the digital surveillance that they put on it.
Right.
Somewhere like Xinjiang, where there's a Muslim majority population, the Muslims are complaining and saying, we're being targeted from the level of information. They're calling it a digital panopticon, where the state can see everything. Is that where we're going?
That is really.
Are we over worried? Are we worrying too much?
I think we are worrying too much.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're calling this Huduma number is Huduma means service. The main objective of government collecting this data is the primary objective is for planning purposes. We do not really have full statistics about the population of people living in Kenya. So this is the first step of getting real statistics about real people who are alive and are actually living in Kenya. The reason why we are looking for all this data is that it will help us in the planning processes with all activities that we will be carrying out within the country. For example, when we talk about the education system, we run what we are calling free primary education. In many cases, the figures we are given about the students who are in schools may not necessarily be right. That now is an area of concern and an area of interest. The president in his speech yesterday talked about the existence of 5,000 ghost policemen who at the end of every year gobble more than 1 billion Kenyan shillings in terms of salaries. That means payment of salaries to people that do not exist. Now, that is an area that we really want to cure. And he actually rightfully said the next step, we want to look at the full civil service. If we only found 5,000 in a population of 40, then what will happen when we actually look at the whole 200,000 population? If we are losing 1 billion shilling in relation to a population of 40 million, then there is a very high risk that we're losing a lot of money when we talk about 200,000 people. So basically, this will help us also in issues of the transparency and actually the element of fighting corruption, which is one of the key areas the president is really focused on. So back to my planning argument, is that as government, we would also need to plan ahead. So the registration and the Huduma number will actually confirm to us, for example, how many children are in grade 4, for example. In 4 years' time, they'll be going to high school. Then we need to plan for high school places for this number of people in 4 years' time. In another 4 years' time, again, they move from high school to university. So basically, is an opportunity to really properly plan. Likewise, when we now talk about, because within our questionnaire, we'll be asking about farmers, for example. We also need to know how many farmers are there. As we talk about fertilizer distribution, as we talk about seed distribution, we really have to have the correct numbers. So the main objective is to really have the correct numbers for purposes of planning.
And you're saying you can plug a lot of loopholes, basically, which would make the government more efficient in the money it's spending.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Because right now it has actually been identified, but the fact that we do not have a biometric database, a database that could really confirm to us the real people, because I mean, people use fictitious information and it's very easy for somebody to pretend to be whom they are not and actually get other services. So basically we want to streamline our service environment.
Are you comfortable with where digital privacy law is for Kenyans in terms of the context of this kind of thing?
Yes, surely we are. There are a number of laws that are already taking care of issues of data and issues of access to data. But beyond that, currently there is already a bill that is at the Senate that would also be coming out very soon, what we call the Privacy and Data Protection Bill. This will address beyond this, so that my reassurance is that people should not be worried, because the Privacy and Data Protection Bill will even re-emphasize on the issue of who has access to what data, who can collect the data, and who can. But then beyond that, the current laws in Kenya, the registration of persons, the children registration, all these laws already cover us in terms of what we want to do. And like I said at the beginning, is that there are various databases, because you find the registration of persons is done by another entity. When you go to look for a passport, it's done by another entity.
Are these databases speaking to each other?
They are not.
They're not.
And this is what we are trying to cure. We actually want to come up with a centralized database of all this particular information that Kenyans have. Yes.
Now let me take you back to, you delivered a very interesting speech at the launch of Metropol TV, and this was about the information economy, the data economy. What is your vision of what's happening? I mean, you know, things are happening at such speed. You're sitting in the cockpit.
Yes.
You probably can see everything going on. Tell us, you know, when I look at the hard data, ICT is being the fastest growing element of our economy now for a decade, right? I mean, it's about 20% CAGR if you include telecom. So this is the sexy part of Kenya Inc. Tell us what you're seeing. Is this, are we taking the opportunities that are there? What do you see, and how do you feel about how we're exploiting this economy?
Well, from a government perspective, one of the things that we keep on emphasizing is that the current government was elected on a platform of being a digital government.
Yes, that was the slogan.
That was the slogan.
Yes.
And actually, that is what we are working towards.
Yes.
So the issue of digitization and transformation of government is really key in the government agenda. And there are a couple of things that we're doing. But let me step back a bit. Some of the foundations, when we talk about digital transformation, some of the pillars or some of the issues that we need to put into consideration, I mean, among many others, one of them is digital infrastructure. As a country, we need to look at where are we in terms of our digital infrastructure.
Where are we in the context of Africa?
In the context of Africa, we are doing very well indeed.
Is that good enough for us, or should we be looking at the world? Because, you know, the world is flat now.
Yes,
PS.
yes. I agree with you. We think, I've always had this slogan, think globally, but act locally.
Yes.
So we think about what are the others doing. I know we are not there yet, but actually within the realm of ICT infrastructure, we are in a scale of 1 to 10, we are at 5. So, but then, like I said, not there yet. So still there is a lot that we need to do in terms of developing and establishing ICT infrastructure. Infrastructure, very key indeed. Secondly, one of the pillars that we really need to focus on is really development of digital platforms.
What do you mean by that?
Digital platforms. Do we have applications that are really on the digital platform? For example, M-Pesa.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
This is an area.
A global phenomenon.
Exactly.
You can buy stuff on Alibaba today. You send money to North America.
Exactly.
So that's, okay, I get that.
Yes.
But, you know, I remember listening to Dr. Mukisa Kituyu, and he's saying, I want to make Africans visible on these platforms. I remember that's what he said. Are we visible on these international platforms? Or are we just resting on our laurels and saying, look, well, M-Pesa, look how well we've done?
Well, I want to agree. I want to agree that we have talked too much about M-Pesa.
Yes.
We need to go beyond that M-Pesa. We need to rediscover something else. And actually, to me, that challenge I would put to the innovators outside there, that they need to really get and begin thinking out of the box. What else can we do outside M-Pesa? I would say M-Pesa provided for us what we are calling a starting point. That actually you can have an innovation that can be transformative, that can actually go beyond the boundaries of Kenya. So our innovators outside there, my challenge too is, are we able to think outside the box and have so many other versions of M-Pesa? And I know we are. We are. In fact, as government, what we did, we have established what we are calling a white box, whereby basically this means any innovation people can
This
throw.
is this the one that that blockchain people are doing, or is that something else?
The blockchain people are doing something else. This
Yes.
is something else that we are driving as a ministry,
Yes.
basically to focus on innovators outside
So what,
there.
the sandbox type idea?
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah, but
yes.
we have decided to call it a white box.
A white box.
Yes.
So if we got a great idea, we can get into this
Throw
white
it
box
in there, exactly,
and see what happens.
and see what happens. We have judges, they come and do some form of evaluation. If it's something that needs to be taken to a step further, we are ready and able to do that. So that is an area also we are working on. So back to our digital journey, and
Yes.
maybe the key, and there are many more. Another thing that probably is very key and very important in a digital transformation is really development of digital skills.
Yes.
And I know you'll ask me as a country what we are doing about
What
that.
are we doing?
We are doing
Yes.
great things.
Yes.
The introduction of what probably you're aware of, what we're calling the laptop project.
Yes.
Whereby we started, our objective was to really begin building the digital skills to the lowest level possible.
Have
which
you
is
done
basically-
that?
Yes, we have done that. And we introduced tablets in schools from grade 1 to grade 3. Whereby now these kids were exposed to tablets. And so at that point we had the devices, and we were actually using the slogan that they're actually learning to use the devices. So give them, they are able to play around with them. Then from grade 4 to 8, they're actually beginning to use the devices to learn. So in terms of digital skills, and that has gone even beyond the primary school and beyond the high schools. Many universities have ICT courses. So I would say that there is a strong population of young people who are actually digitally enabled in terms of skills. So that element, that area there, we have actually done a lot of development on that.
Isn't there an opportunity here? Because I saw some, you know, there's some relatively easy work which is too expensive to do today in the US, in the UK. I saw somebody built a business on people just inputting a doctor's prescription and you put it in a computer. Is there an opportunity for us to create massive jobs for our young people and basically use labor price arbitrage where we just connect them? They can be in Eldoret, they can be in Wajir, it doesn't matter, but they can earn them. Is that possible?
Very possible indeed.
Are you doing it?
And we are doing it. We have introduced what we are calling the Ajira program. Ajira again is Swahili for work, whereby we have
I
introduced...
thought Kazi was work.
Kazi is real work.
Yes.
Ajira is employment.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. Ajira is kind of employment.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is actually online employment.
This is what we were, yes.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. This is online employment. So we have actually introduced very many youths, and we have started what we are calling Ajira clubs in universities and in technical and vocational institutes, whereby now we have champions, Ajira champions within schools, and they are actually training other people. Beyond that, we've come up with a concept whereby we have established what we are calling constituency innovation hubs. We have 290 constituency, and within this, we are trying to ensure that we have at least 4 constituency innovation hubs in each constituency. At least they are coming up slowly.
Like a magnet.
Yes,
Yes.
they are coming up slowly, but the basic objective is to actually have young people in these hubs to basically focus on how to do the online work. So what you're saying, it's something that we have started, and I've
Because I
been
would have
going.
thought you could possibly get a lot of jobs that way, right?
Sure, yeah.
Which would not be badly paid.
Exactly.
You know, if
No,
you're
I mean, I
yeah.
have a testimony of, recently I went to another college whereby I was launching an Ajira club after having gone through the training. And one of the testimonies, a young man telling me he was able to do $600 in 2 weeks.
That's good money.
And he's in the university. Well, that means he pays his full school fees by himself without bothering the parent, and he's able to,
Well, we can all hope for that situation one day with our children.
Yes.
Piers, let me ask you another question, okay? So, you know, you're sitting there. what opportunities are there? I remember the BPO was a big subject. Now no one talks about it. But if you're looking into your crystal ball, P.S. Jerome Ochieng, and you're saying to me, and I'm saying to you, look, I got some money, I want to put it to work in the digital economy. Where would you tell me to be doing it?
Very good. I think there are great many more opportunities within this digital economy. First of all, like I said at the beginning, our infrastructure is not complete.
Okay.
So,
where is it incomplete?
In terms of connectivity.
Okay.
Yeah. We have done fiber connection to many parts of the country, but we have not done what we are calling the last mile to very many other public institutions.
Okay.
So this again is an opportunity whereby people can actually come and invest and actually do that last mile.
So you see the last mile opportunity.
Last mile opportunity is available. Again, development of apps.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of that in the banks. And,
yes.
And the taxi with the Ubers. And
with the Ubers and
all of that.
Exactly, yeah. So like I said, our innovators need to put on their innovation caps. The beauty is, from the experience of M-Pesa and everything, we are at a certain position in terms of appreciating ICT and
we
technology.
adopt it, right? We're early
and we
adopters.
already adopt, we are early adopters. Therefore, any other innovation would actually equally be easily adopted. Unlike a scenario whereby technology is really not there, then you find it very difficult to push people into it. I'll tell you for sure, when the M-Pesa thing came, people were hesitant for a while.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I remember.
And
How is the money in the
how
phone?
Is the money? Yeah. How does it? A guy sends me. It's going to be like that thing of Huduma Namba. Somebody is saying this number has some because a guy would say, "I mean, you are sending me money on my phone. How does it enter there?"
That's right. Yes. Yeah. They must think you're a wizard or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Something. Yeah. So basically, we are saying we have the advantage of being early adopters of technology. And the technology having been inculcated within ourselves, therefore it becomes very easy for us to actually embrace any new technology or any new development. Again, also as government, with the introduction of technology, certainly there is really a lot of infrastructure building. Like for example, like right now, as we talk about this collection of data and the establishment of more data, you will realize the issues of data centers become very critical.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because
Yes.
I remember, Jerome, when I was a young man,
Yes.
and if you ask your parents, what do you want to become? And in those days, it was like a lawyer, an accountant, or something like that, right? If you wanted to be serious.
Correct.
I remember thinking music was not an option. Today, in Mombasa, where I come from, there was one band called Them Mushrooms. Today, there must be thousands of musicians making a living.
Exactly.
Data science seems to me to be the job everyone should be going for, because you're collecting all that data, but it's useless unless you analyze it.
Until you analyze it, yeah.
Are we seeing a lot of interest in that space? Universities picking it up?
They surely are.
Yeah.
Universities are picking up that. And actually, there is a lot of conversation going around the real importance of data. If you remember in my speech, in my closing remarks,
you said it's more valuable than oil.
Exactly.
Yes.
That as a country, we are lucky. We have oil, and also we have data.
Yes.
Therefore, we have two frontiers for mining. We go on and mine the oil, and also we go on and mine data, whereby actually there is a lot of revenue that can arise from data mining. So that's an area that really we need to clearly look at and invest in. So basically the opportunities there, very numerous.
P.S. Ochieng, thank you very much for making the time. We'd like to continue this conversation in the future. I think there's so much we've got to discuss, and there's so much you can share with us. Thank you for making the time today. I thank you, the viewer, for dropping by on our Smart Investor. We hope we were smart today for you guys. Metropol TV, the first 24-hour business channel here in Kenya and in East Africa, I do believe.
Yes.
And it's a real pleasure. I was your host, Ali Khan Sachu, and we had today the Permanent Secretary, ICT, P.S. Jerome Ochieng. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.